For this month's May Zeal Call, it's a pleasure to be joined by Kevin Owocki from Gitcoin. Gitcoin is a community for developers to collaborate and monetize their skills while working on open source projects through bounties. Kevin is going to talk us through something called Quadratic Funding, as well as touch on other projects and updates he's working on with Gitcoin. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Can you guys see my screen? Yes? Okay, great.
It looks great.
So, hi everyone, I'm Kevin Owocki. Elena gave me a little bit of an introduction, but for those of you who don't know me, I am the founder and CEO of Gitcoin, degree in computer science from 2006 from University of Delaware. Been doing web startups all my life. Now I'm in the blockchain space running Gitcoin, and I'm backed by Consensus, which is the first sort of investor that has ever believed in me in running my own startup, and I owe a lot of where Gitcoin is right now to Joe. And I'm also a community organizer out here in Boulder, Colorado, and basically I've run the Boulder blockchain meetup for the last 2.5 years. We've done about 30 meetups, and I just love the community out here. It's really great to be immersed in a really smart, free-thinking culture out here in Colorado. DC, Zuko, a bunch of other people are from Colorado in the Zcash community, and that's how I found out about Zcash when it launched back in back around the 2015, 2016 era. Basically, this picture on the left is I was having a problem with a GPU miner I had built and was mining Zcash on the actually on the day that Zcash launched its mainnet. I was mining it, and these are some graphs from a Munin implementation that I hooked up, and you can see that my rig was not very stable. It was going down about every day or two. So it's fun to be involved in Zcash, and I've kind of followed the community with a lot of respect for Zcash since that day, and also just seeing the interop with the Ethereum community, of which Gitcoin's primarily focused on right now. So our work in the Ethereum community is around growing and sustaining open source. Our mission is to grow and sustain open source software. I believe that open source software has created tons of value for the world, and that open source software developers have to work on it nights and weekends, take time away from their family, and can't even pay their mortgage with their work on open source software, which I think is BS. And now that we're building this open source financial system, all the money that used to go to some back office on Wall Street is now going to open source software. And so Gitcoin wants to build the rails to give everyone who works on open source the financial leverage to leave their job and to just basically close the gap between value created in open source and value captured in open source. And so I invite you to check out gitcoin.co/results, which is our statistics page and is updated every 3 hours or so. So far, we've delivered about $5 million worth of value to open source software developers in the Ethereum space. And hopefully that value creation keeps on accelerating as we continue on with our mission. So I'm here to talk to you today about Git Coin Grants. Git Coin Grants is basically a live product that has delivered about $2 million worth of value to the Ethereum space. So basically the way it works is that if you're working on an ETH 2.0 client or a privacy mixer in the Ethereum space, you can go to Git Coin Grants and you can basically view different projects that are working on public goods in the Ethereum space, and then you can contribute to those projects using Gitcoin. So if I was to contribute to Gitcoin or Tornado.cash, I could click a fund button and I would basically be able to contribute directly to Tornado Cash, and that transaction will send them DAI, ETH, any token that they need in order to fund their work in creating privacy in the Ethereum space. But the gimmick that makes Gitcoin Grants different from other crowdfunding sites like Patreon or this Zcash Grant.io product, which I'm friends with Daniel Tiranek, is basically that we raise a matching fund that we will match your contributions to Gitcoin Grants for a 2-week period every quarter in the Ethereum space. But it's using this matching formula called Quadratic Funding in order to do it. So basically in traditional one-to-one matching, grant one gets $100, grant two gets $100, and both grants will get $100 in matching. But in quadratic funding matching, if grant one gets $100 from one funder and grant two gets $100 from 10 funders, then grant two will get way more matching than grant one, because the preferences of the many in quadratic funding outweigh the preferences of the few. So basically there's this formula in which the cost to buy part of the matching fund increases quadratically, increases exponentially until you add new people into the system. And so quadratic funding is the mathematically optimal way to distribute funds to public goods that the democratic populace actually really cares about. So the idea is to create a matching system in which the preferences of the many outweigh the preferences of the few. So our traction thus far in the Ethereum community has been such that in 2019, when we launched Git Coin Grants, we did about 200 contributions and raised 40K. Q2 of 2019, we raised 60K, 300K the next round, 350K the next round, and then up to 500K in the following round. And the cool thing about Git Coin Grants is that we're building this map of the preferences of the Ethereum community. What projects are respected in the community by their peers? And so we're building up this dense mesh of basically preferences in which you get to see who actually cares about what project based off of the contributions. We have 8,000 contributions in the most recent Git Coin Grants round. And the cool thing about that is that we basically are democratically funding the projects in the space. In this graph, each node is a user or a project, and each edge is a contribution from a user to another user. So totally peer-to-peer democratic way of funding an ecosystem. So that's basically what we've done in Git Coin Grants. I am generally a humble guy, but I would be really I'm really proud of the fact that we're changing lives in the Ethereum space. Vitalik has said that Git Coin Grants is a significant pillar of the Ethereum ecosystem that more and more projects are relying on in part or in all for support. And you can just kind of see some of the numbers from round 5 in this slide. Certain projects in the space have raised on the order of tens or 50K worth of money using Git Coin Grants. And it's been a way for the Ethereum community to basically measure what is important to their community. So we're building this tool for crypto ecosystems that we think is more efficient than an in-house grants team, helps your community signal what's important to them, helps your community split the bill with you, and it's a marketing activation point to your ecosystem. Basically, all these projects are posting about what they're doing during this 2-week period, and you get to actually learn about all the cool stuff that's going on in the ecosystem. And the thing I'm most proud of is that we're radically pushing power away from centralized administrators to the edges of your community, which, I've been following what's going on in the Zcash community with major grants, and I think it's a pretty exciting thing. So I don't mean to paint too rosy of a picture. I am a computer scientist, and I think that adversarial thinking is a really important part of this space. We are doing ongoing research into what's called Sybil attacks, which is basically how do you prevent people from making fake identities and basically pretending to be someone else because they can get more of the matching funds by being someone else. We're doing research to prevent collusion attacks, which is basically how do you prevent someone from giving their friend, hey, I'll give you $1 and you take half of it and you contribute the other half to the grant pool in order to get more of the money for me. So that's called a collusion attack, in which you collude with someone else to take more of the matching funds in an illegitimate way. And then the last question is, how do we raise money for their matching funds? So basically, this is like, how do you solve the free rider problem in public goods? How do you convince someone that they want to put up money for the matching pool? And it's timely that we're having this conversation right now, because I'm actually trying to figure out that issue with the Zcash ecosystem. We have about we have a 15K pilot that we want to do with the Zcash ecosystem this summer. And we still need to raise about $2,000 more, if my math is correct, in order to get this off the ground in the Zcash ecosystem, which is, I think, why I've been invited to present here today. And so if you're interested in seeing this pilot get off the ground in the Zcash ecosystem, I would really like to prove out that it can work in another ecosystem like Zcash. And so basically check out this Zcash community blog post that Nathan Wilcox has been so nice to put up for us. And we're really close. Nathan Wilcox and David Campbell, I think, have offered to match around $4,000 worth of donations. So we actually only have to raise $5,000 of the 15K in order to actually even make it work. I will leave you with one thought before I get into Q&A, and that's that basically the cool thing about Quadratic Funding, and the reason why it works when other micro-tipping and crowdfunding campaigns don't work, is because when you contribute $1, you can get $73 worth of matching if that project is widely supported. So the psychology of why should I give a hoot about contributing to a project has quite changed when you're able to get way more from the matching funds than you do out of your own donation, because you're voting with your dollars. And so I think that that's the really powerful part of Quadratic Funding. And the reason why we saw Git Coin Grants round 3 go up to 2,000 contributions from round 2, which was only 400, was because we baked into the UI this little module that looks like this, that says contribute $1 and get $30, contribute $10 and get $55 to your project. And so I think that the psychology of that is really what makes Git Coin Grants work really well. So I would love to work with the Zcash ecosystem, and I have a ton of respect for the public goods that Zcash is creating for the world at large and for the Ethereum ecosystem. And so I'm hoping to get over the line with this and bring Git Coin Grants to Zcash. So awesome. That's my spiel. Thank you. Should I go into the questions in the Zoom chat? Or?
I took notes for them, so I'm happy to kind of rattle them off. But people in the chat, feel free to keep them coming. Don't be shy. So the first couple of things, Kevin, is thank you so much for walking us through all that. I love the subtle but old school flex of like, I've been here that you did earlier in the presentation. It is awesome to see how like these communities are cross-pollinating from one project to another. It's definitely something that I think has been the theme of the summer at ECC. We have Developer Alliance, Gardening Club, like so many connections across a lot of friends and projects at the in the crypto ecosystem. So that was really cool to see. The first question that came up in the chat was, why open source? Why not fixate or have the Gitcoin model on all kinds of software? Why the specific focus on open source?
Yeah, so I mean, I perceive that there's a lot of difference between value created by open source software and the value captured by open source. So basically, there's a study that came out in like 2010 that said that $400 billion per year of economic value is created by open source. And because the code is all available online for free, the people who write it don't get any of that money. So you could basically have written a really popular open source package and still be working for some bank that you hate, or like not even have a job. For me specifically, my experience has been that I've been doing web startups since 2007, basically when I graduated from college. Every time I build a project, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm using an open source web server. I'm using an open source database server. I'm using OpenSSL. And so you're really standing on the shoulders of giants every time you work on open source software. And one of the problems is that, like the Heartbleed bug, I think in 2014 is a great example of how open source isn't really well supported. Basically, the entire web runs on OpenSSL, and the OpenSSL Foundation was running on 10K in grants and $1 million in contract work. And so, of course, they had a bug in their software that affected the entire internet. And so if we write that wrong, it's not only a moral right for open source software developers to capture some value, but it could also make our foundation of our internet a little bit more solid.
Yeah, I also love how it kind of goes against this idea. I think that there's a myth that's really prevalent in crypto that if you got in early, you must be super rich or you must be
Yeah.
loaded. And I feel like I have met quite a few people who I've learned a lot from, and they've been in this space for a long time, but didn't necessarily come at it from like an investment perspective or a you know, carry bags full of coins perspective. Another
Yeah.
question that people have asked, one is there's two kind of around the Zcash community, kind of looking at the Ethereum community, maybe comparing the two. So one question is, Zcash is a much smaller community than Ethereum. How do you think that might impact how quadratic funding works if it's just a smaller group of contributors? And then the second question kind of piggybacks on that, and I want to get it right, 'cause it's from Nathan himself. Ethereum's community is so vibrant, and Zcash's community is vibrant and creative and wonderful and quirky, but we want to see it grow. So what do you recommend for growing the Zcash community? What do you think might work? What are good approaches?
Yeah. So basically, Zcash is smaller community than Ethereum. How will that affect quadratic funding? And the second question is, how do we grow the Zcash community? I think. Cool. Yeah. So basically, do you actually have numbers on how big the Zcash community is? Because if I'm talking about 100 people, that's different than like 10,000 people. Do you know exactly like how you would quantify the difference?
We don't, but I think a good place to think about is kind of separating developers from broader users. So a lot of times, like when you want to kind of talk about like, oh, the strength of our community or the growth of our community, people kind of mix in together, like people who are building or developing and then people who are using, and both are really important. I think you need both in order to make a project work, but we don't have concrete numbers.
Okay.
We can just say like, maybe it's smaller by a factor of X and then go from there.
Got it. Yeah. It's surprising to hear that because the Boulder Blockchain meetup, we actually had, I think, Zuko and Nathan and a few other people come present to us. It was like our most sold out meetup that we ever did. And so, I mean, I think that within the crypto community, Zcash is a well-respected brand and has a strong community. You know, as you go further down CoinMarketCap, I would get worried about the existential, like how many people care enough to contribute to public goods in these ecosystems. But as long as you're in a top 50 coin, I think that there's enough people who care in order to build a dense mesh of contributions. And I'll just share my screen really quick and just like show you that this Twitter thread is basically shows sort of the growth of the public goods funding on Git Coin Grants in the Ethereum ecosystem. We started off with this sort of dinky mesh of contributions of only 200 contributions in 2019, and then we grew to 400, and then we grew to 2,000 in late 2019, and then we grew to 5,000, and now we have this dense map of the community's preferences coming out of the ecosystem. And so I think the key is just to create a foothold by starting somewhere, by proving that it works. And that's why we're only doing 15K this first round. And I think that, you know, the 15K is a small enough experiment to be, you know, no one will be too hurt if it doesn't work out. But it's also a foothold wherein if things go really well, then maybe we could start doing bigger rounds. And I think that the key is really iteration from there. And so I guess that's the answer to the first question. And Zcash is somewhat smaller. How will that affect the quadratic funding results? If no one's having follow-up questions, I guess I can move on to the second question, which is how do we grow the Zcash community?
Yeah, I'll keep track of these for you so you don't have to follow along.
All right. Should I move on to the second question then?
Yeah, so the second question, in terms of like how to grow.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer and sort of like, I'd like to think I'm a systems thinker, but I don't know. And so like basically the way I think about building ecosystems is basically, how do you move through the different steps in which you find software developers for your ecosystem or for your company, and how do you bring them down the funnel? So basically, how do you source people who would be a good fit for the ecosystem, whether they're software developers or privacy advocates? How do you select the ones that you actually want in your company or within your ecosystem? How do you sell them on the Zcash mission and the Zcash community and all of the momentum that's going on there? How do you onboard them into being successful participants and engaged participants in the Zcash ecosystem? And then finally, how do you retain those participants in the Zcash ecosystem once they're already there? And so, I mean, like that's sort of like my systems approach to how do you build out an ecosystem. I mean, our whole thing with Gitcoin is basically building a product suite that spans this entire ecosystem. And this is sort of an opportunity, I guess, to just very briefly talk about the Protect Privacy Hackathon that we're going to be doing with y'all starting in about 2.5 weeks. Looks like on June 15th. And so basically we're going to have several $1,000s worth of prizes for people who want to work in the Zcash ecosystem and earn ZEC in exchange for doing it. So, I mean, I think that a multi-pronged approach that follows that funnel is the path that we've been building our product suite around. And I think that, I think I'd have to take a look at your metrics to brainstorm a little bit more about how we increase the ecosystem. But from what I've experienced on the sidelines, Zcash has a strong brand around privacy and why that matters to the 21st century, why that matters to our rights in the 21st century. And that's what's drawn me into the Ethereum the Zcash ecosystem. I'm only a data point of one, but I think as more of our communications go online, that message is going to increasingly resonate with more people. So looking forward to working with you guys on that in the future.
Heck yes. Okay, so there are more questions. People are really jumping in, and I love that. So one question is Gitcoin a for-profit, and how is it set up kind of from a business perspective?
Yeah, so we're funded by Consensus right now, which is, I think, a Swiss company. And the plan is to spin out we've been saying we're going to spin out in 3 months for about 12 months now, such is the nature of this sort of volatile crypto ecosystem. But my end game is to have a nonprofit part of Gitcoin and to have probably a for-profit entity also. And that just kind of enables us to do different things with different arms of the brand. I come into the crypto ecosystem really worried about rent-seeking behavior and extractive behavior between companies and their communities. And so I'm sensitive to making sure that Gitcoin's incentives are aligned with its users. Right now, we're not profitable. We're not extracting much from the ecosystems that we're engaging with. And so, I think that the question, just know that that's something that's on my mind, and we haven't gotten to the point where we have to figure out what to do with the profits yet.
Yeah, and I feel like the not profit for profit kind of sister company model is super common in the crypto blockchain ecosystem, and it just speaks to how much more dynamic you can be with these different types of funding models. This is, again, my personal opinion, but I, in my life before crypto, worked in nonprofits for most of my career, and it's just fascinating to see how people are kind of approaching the same problems but with a very different perspective now that technology allows for different types of collaboration, different types of resource sharing. So it doesn't surprise me at all that that's what you said, that there might be some sort of hybrid approach there.
Yeah, I would just really quickly interject. There's a model out here that's being used a lot in Boulder called B Corp, which is basically if you're a for-profit company, as a director, you have to do whatever maximizes profit. And B Corp just legally allows you as a director to write how good is this for open source into your bottom line. And so that's a structure that we're looking at also. But for now, the answer is we're funded by Consensus and just part of Consensus.
Nice. And two questions came up regarding the Sybil research that you mentioned. So one is just generally like in the Git Coin grants that you've seen, have you seen Sybil attacks? Have you tried proactively to prevent them? If so, how? And then the second question was, you know, how realistic do you think it is to have a solution to, like, is there a silver bullet for collusion attacks or Sybil attacks? I know kind of I phrased it. You can probably tell what I think about that, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm actually looking for it on Twitter right now, but I sent a poll that was like, hey, I like to err on the side of transparency. How open should I be about Gitcoin Sybil prevention architecture? And people were, 9 out of 10 people were like, don't talk about it because it'll just help the attackers evolve past it. And the other half were like, you're open source, you got to be transparent. And so I'm still kind of walking that line a little bit. Gitcoin's identity mechanism right now is GitHub, and basically GitHub has their own Sybil attack mechanisms, but they're not good enough to protect tens of thousands of dollars. So we're introducing SMS confirmation for the first time in Ethereum for Ethereum grants. And basically when you contribute to a grant, then you just have to confirm with your SMS number that you got some code, which is a pretty common pattern. And as long as we validate that the provider of that SMS number is not some cloud provider, then it adds a layer of Sybil protection. And we're also privacy aware, right? So we're going to be not actually storing anyone's SMS number in our databases because we don't want there to be a database that connects on-chain addresses to SMS numbers, which are probably KYC'd. And so trying to do that in a privacy preventing kind of way. I do have Sybil protection tools in-house at Gitcoin that we leverage. And so I haven't decided exactly what level I want to disclose what those are, but we have caught Sybil attacks in the past. And to answer your question, I don't think we know whether or not it's completely preventable yet. Vitalik Buterin has a really great post, which I'll link right now, called On Collusion. And basically, you can have everything from like lazy people sitting in the same room using the same IP address, Sybil attacking your system, all the way up to like nation state governments like North Korea issuing driver's license falsified en masse, attacking your system. And so the key is that as you raise the amount of money that's being in Quadratic Funding, then you have to raise the like sophistication of attack that you can handle. And right now I know that we can handle the bottom rung of attacks because I see it every day, but it's about scaling that up as you scale up the amount of funds. I'm going to put that the link to that blog post in the Zoom chat, and whoever asked me that question, I would be happy to jam more on Twitter if you want to.
Awesome. So we have about 10 minutes left if we want to save time at the end for hopping over to Jitsi. 10 minutes left, and we have about 7 questions. So yeah,
I'll try to just popcorn through them from now on. I know
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, some of them take all the time you need. If we can always kind of jam on Twitter or in the forum for any leftover questions. Okay. So one probably really quickly is, does Gitcoin have a coin? Like, is there a Gitcoin coin? No? Okay, perfect. So then the other question that came up is, can anyone be a Gitcoin grant recipient, or do different projects have just specific criteria for who can be a grant recipient other than just being voted on?
For the first 2 rounds of Ethereum grants, we approved all grants because we wanted them to be high quality. And after that,
people at Gitcoin?
Yeah, in concert with Vitalik, who funded the round. But we since moved to a permissionless architecture because we thought it was important for us not to be gatekeepers. I think for this first round of Zcash grants, we will be taking the permissionless approach. I'll double check that, but that's the plan.
Okay, perfect. And then a question that came up once earlier in the chat, and Nathan reiterated it because he may have thought I would have forgotten, but there's no way I'd forget a question. He asks, how do we know after the first QF pilot, like this first round of Zcash Quadratic Funding pilot, how do we know if it's going to be successful or not? or how do we measure success, or what particularly are you looking for in terms of like 1, 2, 3 indicators that it was successful?
Yeah, for sure. Two things. I think broad participation. So number of transactions and number of participants is one. And then the second is more of a qualitative metric, which is, are the projects that were funded quality projects? And you know, projects in this space are working in an abstract headspace, and so it's somewhat apples to oranges, but you can kind of eyeball them and say, you know, this project is really great. And so basically what we're going to do is we're only going to be spending 15K on this first QF round, but I want people to think bigger. So imagine in a year we're doing 150K or 500K, as much as we're doing in the Ethereum ecosystem. If we take that distribution of the 15K round and we multiply it times 30, would it be enough to really power the ecosystem? Like, take the distribution and just scale it up. And would it be a decentralized way of funding the ecosystem if we were to take that and scale it up? So one qualitative and one quantitative, and that's how I think we should judge the results. But it's your ecosystem, so it's kind of up to y'all also. Nice.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I also kind of feel like there's no playbook for this type of stuff, and I'm very excited that the people have been responsive to even just the fundraising part of it. So the fact that we're 2K away is a pretty cool sign. So somebody asked a question about COVID, and I'll read it out loud because I'm not sure I totally understand the question. What's the long-term goal out of COVID-19 for Gitcoin? A larger number of contributions funded, more funding, lesser projects, quality-wise? What's your metric of success? And then I think the person reiterates, out of COVID-19, as in after all this is over and there's a vaccine and all that, like 24 months out. I guess the person is asking kind of like, how has COVID impacted activity on Gitcoin? Have you seen more activity because people are more inside, or have you been impacted in other ways?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, just to address the fact that we're only 2K away right now, is because we've raised $4,000 so far, and Nathan and DC have offered to match up to, I think, $5,000 each. And so basically you take 4K and add 2K and then add the matching, and that's how we get to 15K. So golf clap to DC and to Nathan for offering to do that. So anyway, to answer your question, activity on Gitcoin is up because of COVID. People are looking for better social networks. They're looking for better ways to earn remotely. And a lot of people are retraining into software engineers right now. Right now, Gitcoin is not profitable, and we were planning on maybe raising some money to fund our operations to spin out of Consensus. And it's kind of put a wet blanket on the fundraising markets. And so in that sense, COVID has been a negative thing for Gitcoin. But the third thing that I'll note about COVID is that we're going to actually be prototyping Quadratic Funding with downtown Boulder. So you've got lots of Main Street businesses that are really struggling right now because retail traffic has gone down. Well, there's no reason why we can't take Quadratic Funding, which is a way of funding businesses that a broad swath of the community actually really care about, and using it on Main Street. So taking this the crypto paradigm and bringing it into the mainstream. And so we're actually talking, I raised 25K to run a Quadratic Funding round in downtown Boulder this summer, which I'm super jazzed on because, you know, it's just really makes me mad to see all this stimulus money going to these large corporations and not to downtown businesses in municipalities like Boulder. So that's a third way that COVID has affected us, and we're trying to help the 30 million people in the US who are unemployed now because of it. So yeah, the world is changing, and it's just a matter of adapting to it.
Yeah, I also think it's so critical to point out, kind of as you did, that the new funding models or the new ways of thinking that come out of the crypto industry certainly don't need to stay in the crypto industry. Like, they can grow and apply, you know, into other places, like nonprofits. Traditional nonprofits can learn about and kind of grow from what we're pioneering here. I should say you guys are pioneering. Okay. Kind of two more, I think we have time for 2 more questions, and then I'll write up any leftover questions and put them in the community forum. I also want to say thank you to the 30 plus people who are online right now who tuned in. These community calls we started in January, and they're just such an awesome opportunity to connect with one another and kind of like ask questions, share ideas about the growth of Zcash in particular. So this question is about Zcash Foundation grants. So with the ZF grants platform, what we currently see is that a number of projects don't receive funding from individual contributors because, and the person asking the question says, perhaps due to the expectation that the foundation will end up footing the bill, and thus kind of reducing or de-incentivizing or discouraging individual contributors. The question they ask here is, how do you tackle this this kind of behavior effect, or the social behavior effect, that there's like one or two heavy players like maybe Ethereum Foundation and Consensus in the Ethereum ecosystem, or Zcash Foundation and ECC and ours, like kind of how do you discourage the whale effect?
Yeah, for sure. Man, I know we're running out of time and I'm already verbose. I don't know how to answer this in a minute, but there's this category of problem in public goods. So public goods are goods that are non-excludable, and basically like open source software is a non-excludable good. It's a public good. There's this thing called the free rider problem, which is like basically like, why should I bother to why should I bother to contribute to this good? Someone else is just going to do it. And so it's called the free rider problem. It's a very hard unsolved problem in economics. And, basically the way that we solve it with quadratic funding is by giving just creating that crazy economic incentive where if a grant is popular enough, then $1 can equal $75 in matching, and so that gives you a rational economic incentive to contribute to this grant because, I'm only giving up $1, but this grant will get $75. So that's sort of the secret sauce of quadratic funding and how it gets past the matching, the sort of free rider problem. But I think that it's really about social psychology. It's about your day-to-day community members believing that they can make a difference and cultivating that kind of culture where the rank and file really matter. And I think that quadratic funding is a step in that direction, but there's dozens of other things that you can do as an ecosystem to get there.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here. Like my job before ever working in crypto, I come from a public radio and television background. So I would work the pledge drives and kind of like pick the tote bags, figure out like what will motivate people to contribute. Public radio and television is another great example of free rider problems. And I think the idea of belonging to a community, either by some sort of badge that you definitely see on Gitcoin, the community loves badges. There's a lot of ways to kind of signal your power user status. In a way, it's similar to like the NPR mug or tote bag that perhaps some of you on the call appreciate that reference. Maybe some people don't really subscribe to that. So I kind of wanted to call out first that in the chat, Ben had a really great thing to point out with the public goods problem. I think he used the metaphor of public parks. So if you're in the chat, feel free to scroll up and read through it. There's been so much activity that I can't really locate it. But I wanted to say, Kevin, thanks again for joining us today.